And so
Kate is
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate it too.
6:01, I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Hollis School Board to order. First up, do we have any agenda adjustments?
I think the chair wanted to discuss the potential for a warrant article.
I did.
So I would just recommend we put that as maybe the first item under discussion,
Okay.
and just that way everybody be aware of that. That's it for what I have for agenda adjustments.
Okay.
I may have one of this question about appointing a representative for the January 9th or longer, I don't know, but whatever the situation is, but.
Yes.
Okay.
Should we put that under deliberations?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make that the last item under deliberations. Okay.
That meeting's at 7 o'clock, right? On that Monday?
Yeah.
Most likely, yeah, if it's Bud Council.
Yeah, I have to look. Any other agenda adjustments?
I have none.
Okay. Anybody else? No. Okay. Correspondence, resignations, nominations, and retirements.
I have a couple things.
Okay.
The first one, I just wanted to remind the board that our public hearing is February 7th. Typically, we have not held a meeting on Wednesday before, which would be February 1st. We do our business at the budget public hearing, and we start that slightly early so that we can take positions on the warrant articles that night before the budget committee comes. So we'll be making those adjustments to the schedule, so there will not be a meeting on the 1st. We will be meeting on the 7th, but the focus of that meeting is the public hearing on the FY24 warrant articles. Second thing, I just wanted to follow up. Last month, we had talked about enrollment and class sizes. We have put an advertisement out for a teacher. Abby and Paula have worked together to develop a schedule. And what they've done, and what they'll be advertising for is a full-time teacher to come in and who will do interventions and small group instructions. So that way they'll be in those rooms periodically throughout the day. So each room's ratio will be reduced during specific times like reading and things like that, where obviously the smaller the group is, the better. So that is in progress. We're hoping to attract somebody, but it's a very difficult market right now, but that is posted.
And just to remind the public, that's for grade 1 at the
That's-
primary school because they're over ratio.
Correct.
Our ratio, not state
Yes.
ratio, in a few classrooms.
That's correct. And then I have a retirement. Pam Banks is writing to inform us of her plans to retire at the end of the 22-23 school year. She has enjoyed every one of her 28 years at HPS and Hughes, and she's looking forward to the next chapter of her life. It has been great to be part of an excellent school district. We will miss her tremendously. She has done yeoman's work over her career and just has been an outstanding contributor to our school district. I would need a motion to accept her retirement for the end of the 22-23 school year.
So moved with regret.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
We wish her the best.
Thank you very much. She will be missed. That's all I have for those pieces for correspondence, resignations, nominations, and retirements.
Okay. Approval of minutes?
Do you want me to read them?
Yes, if you have them up, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you, Brooke.
I move to approve the Hollis School Board minutes from December 7th, 2022, with the following amendments offered. Page 3, line 11, delete was, following provided. Page 3, line 30, delete it, following C. Page 4, line 4, the line item description should be reg ed, not red ed. Page 5, line 1, delete A before simply. Page 7, line 12, replace waiting with weighted. Page 8, line 10, schools should be singular.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Great, thank you.
There's also a non-public, so I move to approve the Hollis School Board non-public minutes from December 7th, 2022, as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Okay. It's now time for the public input portion of our meeting. I'm not seeing anyone in attendance. As it was posted at 6:10, we will leave public input open until 6:40. Should anyone, member of the public, show up and wish to speak, we will allow them to do so at that time. So we will move on to the principal's report.
Again, I want to thank Candy and Paula for all their efforts. They listed the upcoming calendar events. On January 9th, the primary school will begin their Ames web testing. January 16th is no school due to MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day. January 23rd through the 27th is Math Week. I know everybody is getting excited for that. On
You
January,
can count on it.
January 26th at Hugh will be our Spelling Bee Championships. We will have the January 28th at Hollis Brookline High School. The PTA will have their Winter Festival. And January 30th is an early release. The students are now enjoying the new swing set that was set up and is complete. And we are now fully staffed with our custodial crew at Hughes. So we're very excited to have all those positions filled. At HPS, we've been spending a lot of time discussing the bathrooms because that's part of our renovation projects for this summer. And the board will be hearing more details in the upcoming months. We had a wonderful end of the holidays leading up to break. We had the Focus for Gratitude at HPS, and they donated at HPS to two special causes, the National Humane Society and the Brookline Food Pantry. Mrs. Lord's class did a sing-along, and it was enjoyed by all. Up at Hughes, the annual volleyball staff versus students is always a wonderful time. And Mrs. Fowler wanted me to make sure to let the kids know they played really well. Yeah, I think that's, once again, her little plug. And the PTA should be recognized for offering a wonderful breakfast on the 23rd. Our enrollment currently is staying pretty much the same. I do want to just call to the board's attention that right now at 674 students, we're the largest we've been in Hollis since 2011. So I know a lot of people out there have seen articles in the newspapers and things about enrollments going down across the state. That is true, but not true in especially this district.
Yeah, not here.
And our overall SAU is up approximately 20 to 25 students. Where we have seen a little bit of a slip is just the large class that graduated from the high school last year of almost 235 was replaced by a class of about 175, which traditionally we go through that. Yeah, so we do see that, but again, the classes that are coming up, as typified by our first grade classes here, are growing, and the same thing is happening in Brookline. And pretty much whenever you take a drive around town, you see that there is more houses going up.
Can I interrupt you with a quick question?
Sure.
And I apologize for being late, I just unavoidably detained. I've been thinking about, since we started the intensive needs program, and we all talked on the board about how would this, in the years of increasing enrollment in general, impact our kindergarten, the size of our kindergarten. And so now we have a very full kindergarten, we have a very full first grade, and I'm just looking forward and thinking, even if this is a bubble, it's a multi-year bubble.
Mhm.
When we have a one-year bubble, we were able to get by with a para and then add a teacher that tracked. But if we're going to have, if the first grade continues to grow past our ed specs at Hughes, for example, or not pass, but up, you know what I'm saying,
Yep.
Andy?
Mhm.
Is there a need to think about, planning budgetary, for budget for additional staff to deal
Well,
with
I
this
think we've
level?
touched on that a couple of times,
Yeah.
because we've been watching the grade 1 climb. We've got 3 classes over our ed spec, and now, as of this report, we're 1 class over in kindergarten over ed spec.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm also
know,
looking at
but
the
like-
intensive needs and et cetera compared to NESDEC, so we're
Mm-hmm.
really, I know those are 3 and 4-year-olds, it's
Right.
not all going right into kindergarten, but with this, the intensive needs group, even though it's tiny,
Right.
it can be just
Right.
make that difference come kindergarten. come
Yeah,
first
for sure.
grade.
But
I think,
I mean,
to
a neighbor
follow up
just
with-
had a new baby.
yeah, to follow up on, Carol's point, I do think there potentially is the need for staffing.
Yeah.
But we have the second grade teacher in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
We have the contingency fund that has always been earmarked for a teacher if a need arose.
Right.
And then we have the unreserved fund balance, so we have 3 different places to go to if we needed 3 teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that we're doing right now is looking at physical spaces.
Right, you
Yeah.
talked about this space
Right.
being subdivided.
There's this space, we have, right now, some teachers are using, like 3 or 4 teachers in a classroom for their office spaces. That might need to be taken back and figuring out those pieces. We'll also look at spacing up at Hughes. If numbers grew rapidly and quickly, we might have to look at, do we move a grade up to Hughes and run K1 and 2 here, and 3, 4, 5, and 6 up there? So we're gonna have to
carpool.
consider.
Is that feasible?
Is it feasible from
Drone.
a,
To move a
Classroom
grade
standpoint?
from just an overall,
physical
physical
space.
plant space?
from a physical plant space, I think it's possible. It creates a lot of instructional pieces that we would have to discuss, because all of a sudden now you're delivering art, music, PE, and that to 4 grades instead of 3 up there.
Yeah.
So basically what you're doing is flip-flopping your staffing a little bit. Sitting here tonight, we're okay.
Yeah.
But I think to Tammy's point, it's more, if this goes from a 1 or 2 year bubble to a long-term trend, we'll have to look at other pieces. And I know the budget committee's already aware of that.
Yeah, we had a long conversation
So-
about it at the
Yeah.
last meeting.
So how would you characterize our pre-K and K programs? Are they growing? Are they very popular? Do you feel as though we're gonna see continued growth?
This is my personal opinion, if I was looking to move into a community and had students that needed specific services, this is probably one of 3 or 4 places I would consider. And those markets would all be about the same cost for home prices.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're seeing. We've put a lot of time and effort into our pre-K and self-contained programs for a variety of reasons. And I think they are, doing what we hoped they would instructionally, and they are allowing us to avoid costs.
Would it make sense, I know we're kind of jumping the gun here, but at some point on a future agenda, to maybe discuss directing you and your staff to come up with some planning around that, some long-term planning about what options do we have? Like one was move a grade up to the
Yep.
Hughes. Another one would be like,
Didn't you talk about self-contained kindergarten and preschool at one
Yeah.
point too?
Yeah.
and
Yep.
we.
Which would allow us to
would-
expand that program, possibly even for
Right.
profit.
And it would be nice to maybe, instead of having it on a discussionary level, to build it into like more details and a plan where we can use the plan to start a conversation
Right.
with the community. Where do you want us to go?
Right.
And start pulling input from budget committees, from community members, from the parent community,
Right.
and start provoking a conversation about what we need to do, because it's gonna be 3 to 4 years from now, it's gonna be
Right.
A massive
I did-
problem.
And I want
and it's
to,
gonna take 3 or 4 years to plan.
Right.
I want to comment, on what all of you said about the intensive needs and the pre-K, regular pre-K need program that we have. On the assumption that these families would move their children into our schools at a later grade. Let's say they went to a different kindergarten or a different preschool, and then brought them to us in first grade. Those students could conceivably be less prepared than we are able to accomplish through these programs. The expenditures these programs are seeing are paying dividends in grades 1 through 6 because the children are so well prepared by the special programs that we do. So it's not just an investment for the child's sake alone at that one grade level. It's also an investment in advancing their capacities to meet their potential in the older grades. So as somebody said, profit. I'm listening, but I'm not paying attention to the faces. If these programs do become ever more popular in Hollis, it's not. There's a cost benefit over the long term of this child's education,
Right.
because they'll need potentially lesser services in the older grades because we prepared them so early.
That's correct.
So there's an educational rationale, is what I guess I'm trying to
Yeah.
spit out, for
Sure.
looking at the idea of this a separate,
Right.
contained.
Right. And we would look at that, and we can do it in two different ways. If short-term, we experienced a large growth, not that they're ideal, but there is the possibility of utilizing portables in the short term. So you can use portables as you transition to a permanent structure. The concern or the hesitation I have is trying to determine if this is going to be the trend.
trend,
or
right.
the bubble,
Right.
because we're seeing a turn in the economy, which traditionally, during my tenure, has showed a migration out of our community as executives from different companies around the area are transferred elsewhere. So right now, we're experiencing that need for many of our corporations around us are bringing in staff. And one of the ways they're doing that is, if you're coming into one of the major corporations around here, you have some very good choices for school districts and a number of choices. So it'll be very interesting to watch as we transition into this new year. Where does the economy go, and what does that mean?
I think Rob's point is a good one, though, regardless of
Yep.
what happens imminently.
Right.
Our community is very desirable. Our school districts are very desirable,
Continue
and
to
that
be.
and it may dip momentarily. It's just gonna be one of these. So we're still gonna have to address this. So I would love to see what he's asking for and getting some kind of pen to paper on these plans. And here are your different options. Portables being one.
Yep.
Self-contained, separate building where all these the
Right.
pre-K can be housed. That kind of stuff.
Right.
Just
We
to
do
have.
We
that
do, as a
planning.
board, we do our best job when we're planning, not reacting. So if we can get some, insight from you and your team as to what makes sense educationally, feasibly,
Yep.
things like that, it just helps us to have that to engage the community and build
Right.
conversations.
I agree, and I think, one of the things that we've been very successful at is our capital improvements plan and how we've gone about
Been tremendous.
moving these buildings forward. So we'll begin, and again, we've already done some work to that end.
Yeah.
Research portables, because we've also looked at just, is it better to add on to this building going off either side? Is it better to have it a self-contained new building that's built for the size of the children, and the needs of the children? Because again, not you're building it for this purpose, but that type of facility can also become a revenue generator, because there are many communities looking to place younger children into self-contained programs.
Right.
And this would be, again, natural for many communities because it's a short bus ride
Yeah.
to the area.
I really like the idea of something that is just for
Separate.
the young, really young kids,
Right.
and not so connected to the older kids and the management
Right.
of all that interaction.
Right.
But it's an option. You can put it into a plan, and it can be discussed and debated.
Right. No, there's a number of options because you do have the SAU property.
Yes.
You know, and if you were going to build a new preschool, you know, I would recommend attaching an SAU to that, so you have a long-term home, and then you would naturally have the ability to get in and out of that property because the SAU building itself could be gone.
Right, so it really addresses a lot of long-term challenges and issues that we've seen for many, many years.
Yep.
So it's like a single solution that fixes a host of problems.
Correct.
And then we'd have to take, just because devil's advocate, I completely agree.
Please do.
But the devil's advocate side is, we have to look at RSEC, the school in Amherst, and how they had, you know, growing great guns exactly like we're describing, and then, you know, the economy does change and they're left holding a bag on a building. So we have to be very smart about how we recommend property changes that can expand and contract with the economy, economic shifts
That's correct.
over the lifetime of a building, not just the lifetime of.
Yeah, I would say we would need beyond a plan and options. If we were to go down that route, we would need some expert, you know, forecasting by, you know, economic expertise, maybe some real estate expertise that gives us some sort of outlook that we're not going to peak and valley really hard.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we got this facility with nobody to
Right.
populate it.
Exactly.
We don't want that either.
Right.
But
No, and I think we're taking a very logical, sequential approach, because we're sitting in a space that a number of years ago wouldn't have been the library as a whole. You know, it would have been multiple classrooms.
right.
And again, it would be 3 very large classrooms, you know, here, with the other end already having a self-contained bathroom, which is a very attractive piece. And we're scheduled to do a kitchen upgrade this coming summer, which we've been talking about for many years, as well as a bathroom upgrade. So looking at those, obviously, you know, sometimes the most cost-efficient way is taking a space like an existing gym like we have and converting that to classrooms. But that, again, would now generate a need for a new kitchen somewhere. And to your point, it's like that delicate balance between appropriate spaces that you can use for generations versus warehousing a building because your enrollment plummeted. You know.
I've often wondered why, I know we're getting into conversational instead of business, but I've often wondered why some of the modular pieces can't be sort of made hybrid in the sense of busting through a wall and attaching them.
Mhm.
A door, a vestibule, but they're attached as opposed, because what's worst about them is the wandering out into the elements and all that, if you could, you know what I mean? If you could.
And you can do that now. I think, I use the term, you know, modular, and I think we all think of the old ones that were put on a
Right.
trailer and delivered.
They literally looked like they were just a
Right.
tractor trailer truck parked
I
outside.
think-
Separate from the building, but if
Right.
you could somehow attach them, so you have a little extra expense of doing some hardware.
Right. But I think the whole building process around that concept has changed.
Good, good.
You know, in
Yeah.
terms of it's more, I'll say crane-based and build what you need
Sure.
and make it match and everything. So it wouldn't be outrageous for us to figure out a way to attach to our existing building. Because again, CSDA has 2 portables.
They do.
They've been using them for approximately 20
That's
years
right,
now,
that's
so they have a
right.
great useful life. As long as you do the regular maintenance, they come with the self-contained heating. They're not totally attached. There's a overhang between the 2 buildings, and it's only about as wide as this table between leaving and coming in.
But
So-
there are ways, I
So
mean-
that's how they, you know, bathroom-wise, they come into the main building and that, so there are some alternatives that can be looked at.
But that's servicing older kids and
Yes.
higher grades.
Yep.
I don't know if that would be an optimal approach for really young kids, right, and students,
Right.
like pre-K
We
and
could
K.
go out the back and have it be
Right,
third
there may
graders.
be other,
Anyway.
they may have other needs that are conducive to that
Correct.
necessarily. I could see if we're talking about doing something at Hughes, where we're maybe thinking of that,
Yeah.
that kind of makes
Well, I was
sense to me.
thinking about adding a gym that's a temporary building.
Oh,
You know,
that
I'm
could
just
work
saying, the
too.
modules
Yeah.
don't have to be separate.
Yeah.
I guess
mean-
the hardest part about HPS is the footprint of the building
Yeah,
and the
definitely.
means
And
of
the
driving
perimeter.
around it and
Yeah.
everything. The moment you start putting other pieces of footprint out there,
That gets
it messes up
complicated.
really
Yeah.
quick.
And the good news is both of our buildings are in great shape. We
Right.
built
Right.
decades of new life into them.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
So, yeah,
Yeah.
this
well, now that we
elbow
solved
room
There's like
here is
there's
tough.
like one spot, that
Yeah.
one that we
Yeah.
kind of cut out in the back.
But it, you know, to
It's fun to
Tammy's
talk
point,
about, but
I know.
it may be easier for
musings.
us to purchase an addition modular, that would be the new library
Yeah.
connected to this, and now you've gained back 3 classrooms.
that's true too.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's a very open, broad space. And if I have gone on and looked at different alternatives nowadays, and you gotta change your mindset of what modular used to be. You know, now, we're seeing modular homes go up in all sorts of communities that are multiple stories, you know, very big footprints, and when it's all done, you can't tell if we're stick-built or modular. So,
In
we
many
do
cases,
have
their
the big
tolerances
field
are way
on,
better.
between us and Drury Lane,
We
right
do.
over here.
Right.
And we could build on stilts off the 3rd floor out over the playground. I mean, there's a treehouse view.
Speaking of Legos,
All right.
but, you know, we'll start putting stuff together and kind of getting more concrete, but we do have alternatives. So, you know, it would take a massive enrollment increase to really put us over the top.
Right.
Because we do have some spaces that we could, you know, I don't like it educationally, but music and art and those at times have been on carts. And it's not ideal, and I don't want to make it sound like it is. But at the same time, as a stopgap measure, especially if we thought that it was only a bubble and not a trend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Excellent, thank you for that discussion, I enjoy those. And with that, I'll move in with the chair's permission to the discussion. Starting with the revenue and expense piece. Donna extends her apologies. She had a family engagement tonight and couldn't be here, and I was totally fine with that. We are running right now as of 12/12/22, so just closed the year, with running expenses under budget of $216,366. Revenue, we're projecting an increase to what we originally projected of $17,672. So when I put those two balances together, right now, we have an unreserved fund balance of $234,038. As you can see from below that, we'll be proposing a maintenance trust article for $150,000, our annual SAU building trust, which is the rent money that gets transferred to the trust for the building, the special ed trust, and the retained fund balance of $35,067, which would mean that would be running at $1. It's very early. We've had a lot of unfilled positions that were encumbered for a while. And as you recall from last year,
$1.
you know,
We
Think-
can use that.
okay, things progress usually in our favor because of the encumbering of all expenses when we start the year. So
Yeah.
those will start to be released.
That's just
So that is positive news. The major over expenditure, not surprisingly, was special education. We're always doing a budget, like we're right now 18 months away from, you know, when we started this. So we project our best we can, but we're about $116,198 over in special ed and $30,268 in student services, which is occupational therapy services are higher than expected. Other than that, everything is pretty much normal. Where we're seeing the savings is the benefits line, unfilled position, and people choosing different health care plans. So that right now is running in a positive of $125,315. So for December 22nd, we're in very good shape. We feel very comfortable about that, and we'll begin to most likely see encumbrances released that didn't need to be spent. So you'll see those revenues most likely grow. Any questions on the revenue and expense report?
I'm always made anxious by the special ed trust being too small. Every year I want us to put a whole bunch in there. So when we have these big overages, you feel pretty confident that we'll be able to, with our runs, be okay. You'll,
Right, why I feel confident is because this year, we don't, we still have not touched the contingency, so that's there, and we have the unreserved fund balance that's available. What we're seeing with the special ed trust is it growing, because it hasn't been touched. I don't, off the top of my head, know the
Right.
balance, but if somebody from the community got up at the meeting and wanted to change that 25,000 to 50,000, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But at the same time, I can assure you that the student service office is, is really diligent about capturing all the costs of all our known students. It's with the move-ins, that we're, sometimes it's, especially with the little ones, it may be the first marking period is where we uncover something that just doesn't seem right. And they're
Exactly.
referred to an IEP meeting,
Exactly.
and all of a sudden, they maybe need speech services or occupational therapy, and those are the cases we haven't budgeted. So I prefer to use like the surplus in the benefits line to cover those costs and stay away from our trusts and unreserved fund balance and the contingency until the last resort.
So that 25,000 in the special education trust, that would be in addition to the balance that it currently is in the
Right.
trust?
Correct.
Okay.
which is probably
it's 100,000.
125 at this
I
point,
think
or
I was
100?
It's 100,000.
I've lost track.
Yep.
Is it 100?
I think it is.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah, and I mean, for my own personal, I would start getting nervous if that trust was, let's say, under 75,000, or more ideally, under 100.
right.
We've never
That tells me, we need to, gotta watch out.
And we've been progressing conservatively with that trust. In Brookline, when they established it, they did $100,000 to start it because they do not have a contingency fund.
Yeah.
So by doing that, they basically put the same amount that Hollis has in the contingency. And now they've grown to probably, I want to say, probably right around 250,000. And the co-op is in that range too.
Do they have gentlemen's agreements on caps for those trusts? I've forgotten, you told me.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
The biggest agreement is that, obviously, it's a public hearing to use a trust.
Of course.
It's, it's stated reasons, so I think people are very comfortable that that can't be used without having that public meeting to
course.
explain why, we need to go into that. And I'll be honest, the growth in Brookline has been tremendous, just like Hollis. And their budget is a little more conservative than Hollis. So last year they discussed using the trust, and they'll discuss it again this spring.
The only thing is, and maybe you can add clarity to this, once money goes into a special education trust, it can only be used for special education. You can't say, well, we'll take some out of there, and because we have this other need that we, so that's why I have always looked at the importance of having a contingency, which is more of general
Right.
use,
Right.
because the special education trust and was also presented to the community
Right.
that this is just for that
Special.
period, end of story.
And that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
So that would be that unplanned, potentially move-in, or a child who maybe, for whatever reason, is better serviced outside of our district, even though they maybe have started their career with us.
I'm
So-
sorry to drive this question further. I know we want to move on. I've been meaning kind of to ask this from the beginning of this trust. How do you, as the executive, sort of perceive the benefit of using line items where we have extra, where we have surplus unspent dollars versus using the trust? Balanced against the idea of tax money going back into a general fund when we have this earmarked for the purpose.
I think when I look at it, I look at what is the reason for the cost. And I think we've always taken the approach to look to the operating budget first. Can we find it in the operating budget? Because that's basically what we told the taxpayers we would spend.
Okay.
All right? When I say the operating budget, I would look then to the contingency, because that is part of the operating budget. And the unreserved fund balance is also part of that, because it's approved kind of as a safety net. So that's the path I would take. But with the trust, if it was an unexpected special ed expense of maybe needing to place a student who walks in the door tomorrow into a facility, that to me is kind of the intent. But what I've done in Brookline, because it's the only place it's come up, I've kind of notified them of the concern, like last month, and I would tell this board usually the January, February timeframe, and then we would monitor it and decide April, May, whether we would transfer from the trust to the budget to cover that expense.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, anything else on, okay, jumping into the budget. I'd be remiss if I didn't start out thanking the Budget Committee again this year. This is year 9, and they do an outstanding job of listening and digesting the needs of our students. And I can't recall a time since I've been here that if it was a student need, they weren't supportive. You know, they might have a lot of questions, and I respect that, but they have always placed the education for the students as the priority. And they've done that again in this budget, because there are no changes from last month to this month, what we went basically line item by line item. And that's because at the last Budget Committee, Kelly was granted relief from guidance, and guidance was set basically at 0%.
Right.
Basically, the message was, we need you to come in as lean as you possibly can, because it's a difficult year, which we all know. When we went through everything, the only really unknown or piece that had popped up that none of us could have projected was that new classroom teacher.
Right.
And they have always supported our classroom ed specs and that. So the difference between guidance and our budget was $77,292.36. So they gave us relief from guidance of $77,292.36 for that new classroom teacher. Now, that classroom teacher, as we know in the budget, is $99,973.
Fully loaded.
Fully loaded. So this grants us everything we need to maintain class sizes, to continue making educational growth in smart boards and technology and those pieces, to fund the teacher request around curriculum items, to move forward initiatives that Gina has got going. As you know, we're taking a look at math, so we're buying just 1 year worth of math curriculum, and at the end of next year, we'll have more of a formal presentation. And if you have nothing to do, you could watch the co-op meeting on the third Wednesday of this month, because you'll see one of our math teachers will be doing the first presentation about the math program. But that math program is pre-K to 12. So he's been interviewing teachers here. He spent quality time with our acceleration teachers so that we can make sure that progression goes smoothly right through the co-op. And that's Lance Flamino. He's done just a wonderful job. And this will be the first of, I'd say, several presentations to the co-op board. And then in March, April, May timeframe, he'll be coming to this board to
That
speak
was
to
gonna be
you
my
about that.
question.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It's more, we kind of have, from a curriculum standpoint, have worked backwards by design. You know, as you know, we spent all that time putting together what the portrait of a graduate was. So now that we know what we want the graduate to look like, what do we have to do all the way down to the 3- and 4-year-olds to prepare that? So it's some exciting work. The same pieces taking place on the literacy side. That's being run by Lauren in the Student Services Department. And our most recent hire, not a new person, but Christine Height is joining us at the SAU to be the Assistant Director. Her second doctorate is in literacy and learning.
Second doctorate?
Her second doctorate. Her first is in leadership. So she'll be joining us from the high school. So we're very excited about that because she's going to be able to bring that critical eye to literacy. And that really is a focus from a special education point of view because the greater you can interpret what you read, the greater the potential is to be successful in all subjects. So we're going to be using, obviously, she has a wealth of background in special ed. She's also an assessment coordinator, so she does student assessments. And she'll be working with teachers during PLC times to talk about literacy, reading programs, and those pieces. So some exciting things. Christine just joined us when we returned on Tuesday. So she's.
Let's tap that expertise.
Yeah.
Let's put it to work.
It is, and I think it's going to really be some remarkable pieces for us to look at to already a strong program. And the nice thing is, I say, because of all the efforts from everybody that came before us until now, we're in a tweaking mode. We're not in
Oh,
having
she
to.
stands on shoulders.
Oh, yes, yep. But she
She
won't
stands
have to
on
be
shoulders.
recreating the wheel,
Good.
you know? So in terms of the other piece of the budget is the new items piece. Nothing has changed. So we are, as you can see, we're budgeted for the literacy program upgrade. We just took out the math subscription only because we will not be finished and didn't want to purchase something until we knew exactly what we wanted. I'd say right now it's our hope to remain with the same program we use. We've seen some great results, but the committee needs to go through all their boxes and
I
make
really
sure that.
appreciated Gina's explanation that last month. That was
Yep.
very clarifying.
Yeah. In terms of the big thing is that teacher's salary, but if enrollment does grow, we won't hesitate to take care of that via the contingency or other funds. We'll see a revamped mentoring program, and that's kind of in a prep for, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of wonderful individuals approaching retirement. And we want to do two things. We want to tap into their knowledge before they leave us. And two, we want to have a mentoring program so that those people that come on board with us are here for many, many years and contribute like some of our outstanding staff has done. So we're excited about that being here. In terms of the right now, future discussions, so I don't want anybody to think we're doing anything for this year, but we will have discussions around how many specials we will have. I know we started that a little bit about, Spanish, environmental science. To me, that's after we'll get through this budget cycle and start, May, June, talking about that and kind of planning for next year's budget cycle of what do we want to offer and why, and can it all work? So I think that's an exciting piece. We are adding a BCBA assistant to our program, as well as some RBT trained paras. And just for the people at home, because we throw a lot of things out, the BCBA is a behavioral specialist. They work with a lot of students to identify learning areas for growth, as well as strategies that classrooms teachers can use. And the RBT trained para, they're trained in how to gather that data. So this is an individual who joins that classroom, and that data goes back to your behavioral specialist. And they use that data to formulate data-driven decisions. If we're seeing a child who has a difficulty and it's always occurring at a set time for a set reason, that allows us to put in a plan to maybe we can change the schedule. Maybe we can do different things. Maybe their lunch period is too late in the day. There are a lot of different factors into behavior. And when you incorporate that into a child who has disabilities and sometimes nonverbal, those behaviors truly need to be documented and reviewed. So that is going to.
I can remember with one of my own kids that when I had the teacher add a snack, in the afternoon for them, like, hand my child a granola bar.
yeah.
They won't then melt down in the car. That it was just too long a period from lunch to the end of the day, and they'd get in the car and be like,
Right.
I think that's true for every human being, no matter their age.
Right,
Anger is
yes.
real.
Yeah.
So
And
my kids
again,
say, my kid's case, for example, you know, he was a person who could do the academic learning but couldn't do the academic execution. And at a certain point, the team relaying to me classroom behaviors, as cooperative as I was with them, at a certain point, I'm like, you know, hands on my hips. So, you know, one of the paras was assigned to do the metrics, and she measured with a clicker, 51 redirections in one day. And, you know, that set an indisputable understanding of what the problem was, what it looked like. Imagine the classroom teacher dealing with a child who's super sweet,
Yeah.
but likes to stand up and start singing because he forgets you're all in the room. It's, you know, those kind of things. I once heard someone in leadership in the community talk about our paras as being kind of moms who are hired to hold the children's hands during the day, which couldn't be further from the truth. And I understand that because the children's right to privacy, it protects the kids, and therefore we can't really describe what these potentially identifying activities are. But I'm willing to say about my child, because he, you know, he superseded a lot of the problems he had. But these kind of metrics and how they play out in the kid's day and how we address them, it's easy. It's not common sense. It really, the specialists really have the training and the experience to understand what to do.
Right. No, I agree with you, and that's where
So it pays dividends when we have them on
right,
board.
and you made the earlier point, by capturing that data and addressing those behaviors now, the growth that we see
Right.
at the other end is monumental.
Right.
And it's something in education that we're every day becoming more and more aware of, you know, and as a result, being able to better assist students who have different styles of learning.
Right.
Also in the budget, we have what will become a standard replacement cycle for Chromebooks. So basically, unless a child breaks it or drops it or something happens, they'll be issued a Chromebook in first grade, and that'll take them through the Hollis School District. And then they go to the middle school and they get their Chromebook for the next 6 years. So it's becoming very effective. We also have money in there for additional interactive flat panel boards. If we had excess funds in the spring, that is something I would come to the board and see if they would be willing to pre-purchase, because as you saw with the demonstration we did, it's just another one of those pieces that assist student learning. I'm always very conscious of pencil and paper, you know, because I like that. But as you watch the learning pieces of students, there's a whole group of students that benefit from that. And when you now can take my Chromebook and hook it up to that piece, and I'm doing a writing sample, all of a sudden it's about my writing and not my penmanship. you know.
Proprioception, your sensory abilities, all of it.
There's just so many different things that are taken out of the mix, because if you can't read what I wrote, obviously you don't know if I have good ideas or bad ideas. So the minute I take that out of the picture, now we're comparing somebody who has really good penmanship with me, but we're both on the Chromebook. It's now just, what are our ideas? So again, it's just one of those pieces that comes into further display as we move forward.
We saw that demonstrated, you know, when you came to the board and asked for support for teaching the second graders keyboard skills, because the state assessment for third grade required computer skills. And, you know, I was like, hands on my hips. My little girl came home from kindergarten all those years ago and said, I put my hands on my hips, and it became a meme at our house. But in any case, I was so skeptical, and, you know, you allowed us to come into the school and see how Mrs. Courier at the time taught the children, and then how that translated into their classrooms on actual assignments, and it was.
And again, those same teachers who piloted that some of the same people that are piloting the interactive flat panels. And it's just, again, I've been doing it for a while, so it's kind of fun for me to walk in and see how things are the same yet different. Because, you'll see a teacher now start the day and the cue is the music on the interactive flat panel. But everybody in the room knows the cue. Now, 40-something years ago, 50-something years ago, a lot of my teachers rang a bell and everybody clapped their hand. But it's the same routine. It's just a routine that meets the needs of these children who are living in a different world. So it's really interesting, and I commend all our teachers because, as I say, I'm at the tail end, so I ignore some of it. But thankfully, all our teachers in the middle of their careers have embraced this and are really doing some remarkable things.
Well, you mentioned all those teachers who are getting close to age of retirement, and they're all embracing it too.
Yeah, they are.
I love it.
Yeah, they do a remarkable job, and again, it's I'll give kudos. As you know, Penny Currier retired, but Penny Currier is back as kind of our
Reeled her back in.
yes, as one of our mentors, technology integrator, clerk of the works, you name it. She helps us with it, and it's really been great to have somebody with that. I'm going to use the word repertoire because she was a classroom genius.
She was phenomenal.
She was phenomenal. To go in and be able to observe a young teacher and offer what I call non-threatening feedback, because it's not part of your evaluation, it's not part of, how you're judged. It's just about, I'm struggling, will you come in and watch this? And to have somebody of her caliber to be able to offer you input and say, hey, I'll come back in 2 weeks, and we'll see where you are. But I'm right down the hall if it's not going well. And Penny's doing Brookline and Hollis, and it's just, we're seeing some amazing things across both districts, so it's exciting.
One more quick question on
yeah.
the Chromebooks. What is the survival rate of the Chromebooks that you're seeing? When you said 6 years, I was like, whoa.
It's actually very high.
Yeah? Oh, good.
Our students, again, at the elementary schools, especially the primary school, they don't go home often,
okay.
So it's very much a teacher-controlled.
Okay.
And we've seen a few of the screens broken, maybe some keyboard things, but that's all stuff that our own IT department under Carol's direction repairs. So
My kid, when he was in the 6th grade, got to help repair
yeah,
some of the
yeah.
repairs.
So
and
they start going home more in middle school.
Yes, yeah, middle school's kind of, it belongs to you, it's in your locker, it's in your backpack, you're in charge of it. But even there,
Oh,
our
you're saying
kids
you're
are,
allowed to take it home?
oh, it's
for homework.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's back and forth.
I'm
It's-
amazed that my son's is still in.
Awesome.
Well, and I guess that's why I asked. There was one of my children that once carried it through the house like this, and then
Yeah. Oh, and again.
not the Chromebooks from school,
Right.
our equipment. So I just imagine that there's kids that are doing it with the
Oh,
Chromebooks
we
as well.
see some, but it's very limited.
That's great.
And the other piece, because it's basically yours, at the high school level, we're not necessarily collecting them back over the summer.
That was going to be my follow-up question, because the 6 years, are the kids keeping them over the summers? And
Well, and for a lot of our students, a significant number, they're doing eventually AP courses where they're doing all sorts of pre-summer readings and
Right.
all those
Yeah.
assignments, and actually showing up the first day of school with 3 or 4 completed assignments
Yes.
Right.
that, are getting emailed in. And I wouldn't say we're paperless at the high school, but we have decreased paper use considerably because everything is pretty much online. And there's a lot of peer-to-peer editing that can go on. A teacher, again, as we increase the use of these, to move around a high school classroom and see one kid connect, put theirs up, and then the next kid, it's a very rapid piece. But it's rapid because they've had it since they were little children, and they're very comfortable. And like I said, if you need something fixed, go over to the high school and just find one of the teenagers. It'll probably take them 5 minutes, as long as they're patient with us. Yep. So in terms of the budget,
My son's Chromebook is 7.
we are looking at an operating budget of $14,654,566. A large piece of that over the last few years has been the community's support for projects. So there's a big debt load that has gone into there. The SAU assessment is $625,021. The contingency is staying at 95. The maintenance trust, 23,970. That's simply the rent we collect from the 3 districts. That's why it's kind of a funny little number. The maintenance trust is $150,000, and the special ed trust is $25,000. Which brings us to, Kelly put in your board packet a preview of the school district warrant. So I'm not going to go through these tonight, but these basically, I think it's 8 articles, will be the exact same 8 articles that we will take up at the, prior to the public hearing on the 7th. And we'll take positions as a board. And for people at home, that is Article 1, which is the Hessa amount, which we'll be discussing a little later on in this meeting. Then we have Article 2, which is the Hollis portion of the SAU budget for $677,360. Article 3 would be the SAU Maintenance Trust, which is the rent money of $23,970 that we collect and ask the voters to support moving into the SAU Trust for the maintenance of that building. And by the way, as owners of that building, the tub is out. The bathroom is totally gutted. There are no walls, anything. Probably another week to 10 days, we will have the new hallway to the business office and a new bathroom side by side up there in that space.
And we didn't find any
Hooray.
surprises opening up or anything. It's
The
like,
only thing
oh,
we
look at
found,
that.
which was not a surprise, there have been some
Animals.
critters that have not successfully made it back out.
So that's where they went.
Yep,
One
yep.
of those.
With no envelopes full of cash.
No cash, nothing good that we could have been excited
cash.
about. The Article 4 will be the maintenance trust for the Hollis School District of $150,000. Article 5 would be the special ed trust for $25,000. Article 6 would be the contingency for $95,000. And Article 7, the last article, is always the budget, and that would be for $15,831,280, which meets guidance and is supported by the Budget Committee. So again, I think this will be year 9 where both the school board and the Budget Committee have agreed on the budget, which usually results in a very good evening. And then Article 8 is just anything
Yeah.
else that comes before the board.
I'm curious to the order, because sometimes we see the budget, operating budget higher up in the list. Is there?
This is the way Kelly formed it. At the public hearing, we would decide what the order is, because
Yeah.
that's a school board and a budget committee discussion. I have seen, the majority of the time, the budget goes last, because it is subject to a 10% rule,
Mhm.
so they need to know what else has been passed by
Oh,
the
so
voters.
that can be at times the rationale to put it at
Correct.
the bottom.
Correct,
Okay.
yep.
The only thing I do say, our meetings tend to be pretty crisp and short, but in the event that they are somewhat run longer, we do sometimes see our participation wane as the
Right.
evening goes on. So it's always,
Yeah.
it's do we put it at the end or do we move it up?
Yeah.
And
And I think, that could be.
We've got to have a budget.
Right. I think that can be a discussion at the public hearing, because it's the school board who controls the order of the articles, but we've always approached it as a joint discussion between the school board and BudCom.
And I think it's worth noting for the public who's watching this live or recorded, these are all standard articles
Right. Oh, yeah.
with the maintenance trust. It's not like, we've done so many in the past few years with the different improvement projects. These are literally just
Right.
what we need to
Boilerplate.
move the district
Right.
forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like-
So that takes care of
Oh, by the way, before we leave the warrant at the top, it says you're hereby notified to meet at the Hollis Brookline High School. So we used to do it at the middle school, and then we moved to the high school because of COVID, we wanted more space.
Right.
Are we sticking with that then?
I think it's worked well at the high school.
fine with me.
I'm not, it gives us a greater capacity,
Great,
but at the same time,
fine.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm wondering, by doing that too, do we don't make redundant the setup and tear down of two separate locations. It's a one location and,
Parking's better too.
Yeah. It makes it
Yeah.
much easier on things as simple like the chairs and the scaffolding.
Right.
Because that'll all just remain at the
It
high
can
school
remain
for that
without
week,
having to tear
or
it
those
down.
few
Great.
nights.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
makes sense.
Yeah, it's gotta be there for at least over a week for the 3 different meetings. there.
Right, right. The last discussion, which we had added during the agenda adjustment, there's been discussion, I believe, at the Hollis Budget Committee and at the Co-op Budget Committee, because the state law was recently changed around the unreserved fund balance. So you now have the ability, if the Budget Committee and the school board and the voters approve it, so choose, to retain up to 5% of the.
Oh.
That's an increase
Used
from
to
the
be 2.5.
2.5%,
Yes.
right?
Right, and now it's gone up to 5%. So what I wanted to do.
And that's state law, you said?
Yes,
Because I
that's-
know that at
And what-
co-op, there was a vote a few years ago back and forth, right, on that? Was
Right,
that that one?
the co-op, right now, I believe, is at 1%. They didn't do the 2.5 as Hollis did. So they're also debating whether they will bring an article forth to potentially change that or leave it. I mean, they're also, a couple of years ago, they had done away with their contingency, and they're just looking and saying, kind of like here, if a bigger item goes, where would that money come from? And now that we're seeing like a rooftop ventilator, it's 400,000. A new freezer for a kitchen is 400,000. So it's just trying to prepare, to Rob's point, of having that fund that exists if anything unexpected of significance happened.
What's driving the change at the state level to go to 5%?
I think it's basically how costs are driven.
Just general costs?
Just general cost, because again, if we went back, I think the 2.5%'s probably been, let's call it a decade.
Yeah.
Maybe longer,
Wow.
maybe a little
A
shorter.
little shorter,
But
yeah.
a decade ago, I would have got a rooftop ventilator probably for $200,000,
Yeah.
somewhere in that vicinity. An elevator is probably $200,000 now. So I think this is just really to start to address costs. And I think some districts are using it as, I'd say, as a savings account. If they know that in 2 or 3 years, they are going to have a significant expense,
Yeah.
they're looking at this unreserved fund balance as a means to get there.
And it's an option, it's not a mandate.
That's
So
correct.
we could go to 5, but
Gives us flexibility.
we,
Right.
I like the idea of giving the power to local boards to say, hey, we need it, or that's good to know, but we're good.
Right.
And be able to locally assess.
Right. And again, it's been discussed, so I didn't want it to come up at the public hearing and people be surprised.
Right.
So it would read, and this is an example, and this is thanks to Amy for sending this over to me. An example of what the warrant article would read would be to see if the school district will vote to authorize indefinitely until rescinded to retain year-end unassigned general funds in the amount not to exceed in any fiscal year 5% of the current fiscal year's net assessment in accordance with RSA 198:4-B, Roman numeral 2. Now, that 5% could be 4, it could be 3, it could be 3.5, that number can be set, and then it would go to the voters. It would be a simple majority vote. And I think it's come up both in the co-op and in Hollis, because in the last few years, we have returned via COVID significant funds, and I think it's just a reflection on, should we make sure we have the amount to cover a big item? And I'll use the example that I shared with Amy earlier. Many years ago, Hollis encountered mold. That was a significant dollar amount that, to me, would not be covered any other way than what we did. We had a special meeting, and the voters approved it, and we got it all repaired. But this would give the board flexibility if I come in and the heating unit went over the past holiday, so that, Lance could just authorize, we need a new unit. To give you an example, the boiler up at Hughes a couple of years ago was about $270,000. So that's the way prices are going.
Sure.
And if you look at it, we're at 15 million, so 1% would be 150,000. So that would give you 750,000 if you went to 5%. So it's not, it is a very big number. I'm not trying to shortchange it. But at the same time, it's really, if you did 3%, 4%, now you've covered your most expensive item that could go wrong, that would need what I'll call a quick fix, your elevator, your ventilation unit.
My sense is that the community is relatively supportive of these type of things. I think where there's a sensitivity is if they feel as though it's going to grow and continue to grow.
Yeah.
And we have shown and I think build enough trust in the community that shows when we get to a certain amount, we don't add anymore.
Right.
And certainly when there's money to give back, we have and historically and can show that consistently.
So,
So would we then cease having a contingency line item if we raise the percentage up to the 4% and 5%?
I think this is probably something we'd have to discuss in the public hearing.
public hearing and with BudCom, because there are multiple thoughts between the two different districts on how this would go. I can support examples for both, because to Rob's point, the contingency is not a public hearing, it's just part of the budget, it can be spent with any way, so if you're trying to get that teacher.
Yeah, it allows us to act swiftly
Right. I
when needs
understand
are there. The only thing, as you were asking the question, I'm open to the idea, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that getting those funds require steps and process, which is okay, but it depends on what the issue is and how swiftly we have to move. If it impacts our operations, we can't open the doors
Right.
because it's freezing out, we don't have any heat,
Right.
or the water goes. It could take several days or a week to get something posted and go through all the processes to access those funds, and so I'd be a little hesitant about that.
Right.
Thinking through it.
It is a little,
Yeah, to get rid of our contingency
Right.
altogether and say, well, we're covered, it's like, oh,
and
maybe.
it has become more streamlined with the state in terms of the unreserved fund balance. You don't need the state's permission anymore. You have to hold
Oh.
your public hearing, notify your budget committee, do the steps we would have there. But to your point, I think if we were going to be using that, it would be something of like, everybody would probably be like, well, you need to get it fixed, you know? And if it was a boiler, what we would do is we would encumber the money from somewhere because we need to open. So it
Yeah,
would
I
have
would-
to happen.
I'd be more inclined to keep both and say, look, we won't go to 5, we'll go to 4%.
Right. And again, I'm not saying go to 5, I just read it
No,
as it's
not
written.
suggesting you are, but
You know, because if you went to 3%, that's 450,000. That to me covers pretty much any major item. And remember that 3% is calculated on
Yeah.
your net budget. So if all of a sudden, 5 years from now, it's 2 million, that 3% is now 600,000.
yeah, I always looked at it that, the community looks at us to mitigate risk.
Right.
Number one, they want to be able to feel assured that their kids are going to be able to go to school at a regular basis and not have that interrupted in any way, and they really trust us to make sure that we're mitigating risk, but we're doing it respectfully and not just packing money all over the place and having, all this excess. So, want to make sure that we're showing and demonstrating that balance, and thankfully we've had those kind of issues and been able to, navigate all those issues.
So that was my last piece for discussion tonight.
I'm just gonna add that, the idea that we have to pussyfoot around up to 5% while New Hampshire towns, including Hollis, can retain all of their unexpended funds every year, ad nauseum, to whatever piles and heaps they want, has never been fair to school districts, and paints a school district as some kind of untrustworthy agency when it's quite to the contrary, very much to Rob's point. And it is high time that school districts had more ability to protect the taxpayers' facilities, and other assets against emergencies and against emergency expenditures with this kind of perfectly reasonable increase in the percentage that we can retain. Sorry, steam comes out of my ears
That's
when I
what
think
your
about it.
representative is for. Let them know.
Piles
Put
and
in a bill.
heaps.
Piles and heaps, as we'll recall from recent years of public discussion.
So the unassigned fund balance is now P&H.
I like that. I like that. And I will turn it back over to the chair for deliberations.
All right. So the first item on our deliberation is the Hessa item. Should I get a motion and then we can have a discussion about it? Does that work? Carol, maybe?
Sure, I think that would be a great idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I move to approve the retention stipends for support staff totaling $69,257. Source of funding is ESSER grants in the amount of $34,159, and the FY23 general fund in the amount of $35,098.
Oh, we have-
Second.
yes, okay, great. Thank you, sorry.
That's okay.
So, the Hessa negotiation team, which was Carol, myself, Assistant Superintendent Brooke Skog, and Business Administrator Kelly Seeley, entered into discussions with our support services, or Hessa, to address the disparity in hourly rates that came about because we had some hires that were hired closer to the start of school that were hired at a higher pay rate than their counterparts that had been hired earlier in the summer. So there was a discrepancy in hourly rates that we needed to adjust. So we took sort of a two-step approach to addressing it in the current year. We have one component which provides for a $1,000 retention stipend to 28 folks, and then we have 12 other people that are on a step lower than step 6, and we're basically giving them the equivalent compensation of step 6. So we're moving them figuratively through the table. They would get that $1,000 retention stipend in 2 payments. If the board approves it, they would get 1 payment in January and 1 payment in May. So that's the current fiscal year piece. The second piece in FY24, which will be voted on by the voters at our meeting in March, just continues to take corrective action to provide equitable compensation. So we'll move all of support staff will be now off step. We're doing some category shifts to some of the workers consistent with what had been done at the co-op. And we're also providing for a $500 retention stipend. And
For those same 28.
correct, yep.
To clarify.
And so the addition to what had been previously shown as the FY24 cost of the contract is an additional $19,969 for a total of $89,225. And those sort of, yep. And then the impact in FY25 would be $12,682. Questions, discussions?
This is a very complex looking, I know it's not to you because you guys did it, but it's very complex looking. And
That's because there
the
wasn't a way
fundament-
to paintbrush across all the people.
Yeah, we
It was-
couldn't
it
do it
was
that way,
very
yeah.
individualistic.
Exactly.
Moving parts.
Yeah.
I
to the
think the
change.
general purpose of this is to ensure that all of our employees are in a competitive pay scale appropriate to the fact that some of the most recent hires we've been forced by the market to hire at a significant increase over what the CBA you guys negotiated very recently, because inflation really took off, was pretty
Yeah.
significant for a time. and still not,
Yep. And that's a great point. So we negotiated the current contract a year ago, and a lot of the things that we're experiencing now, we thought were sort of short-term. We thought maybe the hiring was a short-term problem, but it's turned out it's not a short-term problem, which is why we needed to make some changes.
I meant to ask you earlier when Andy was reading the principal's report, we finally filled that part-time custodial position at Hughes after 2 years, I think. Is part of that because we were able to pay, we chose to pay a little more and were able to hit a market rate that attracted someone, do you think? I mean, is that the proof in the pudding that this increase is needed?
I don't think the custodian example is a good one, but I have seen us be able to attract more paras.
Oh, good, that's
Um,
critical too.
So I do think that was a wage issue. And I think this puts us in solid comparisons between our neighboring districts. So you're less likely to say, decide to drive 10 minutes to Nashua or Amherst or Milford to do the same job.
Do you have a sense of where in the comps this puts our employees? Is it, you said it's similar, is it about the you feel like it's just basically competitive, or are we competing?
I think we're competitive again. I think if I compared us to some of our neighbors, it would have been potentially close to, in some cases, $3 an hour. And for that, I think people will make a move.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time now, I'd say we're very comparable, and a lot of our parents are community members and would rather just stay in their community.
I'm curious as to how the process at which this was accepted by Hessa itself, right? There's some, under normal years when we're negotiating, it's voted and ratified on their side. This isn't negotiated.
It has been. Well, it was voted on. They
So it
approved
was voted on,
And they
so
ratified
there's
it.
They did.
documentation that they're on
Correct.
board
Yes.
and,
Yep.
okay.
Yes.
And
Yep,
the-
they asked lots of questions, very specific ones, similar to what you guys are asking. How do you break down the groups of people, date of hire, how does this work? And fortunately, one of their negotiating team members also participates in negotiations for the co-op. So when we were talking about bringing in the co-op table in FY24, they already were familiar with that, so that helped
Yeah.
the other negotiators from Hessa to better understand the benefits of that. But yeah, they asked all of the great questions. We had a very good discussion, and they have fully accepted this.
And how does
Was
this?
it your sense, that everyone understood the changes and why?
Yes.
Rather than just a few people close to the issue and,
Oh, yes.
yeah?
Yes,
okay,
very.
Good.
Yeah.
So does this also, how does this place the Hollis district in terms of pay scales relative to the other two co-op districts?
So that's a good question. I think one of the biggest pieces of that is one of the other districts offers benefits
Right.
to some of their support staff that aren't offered here because of the hours that are worked. That isn't something that we can change. But
Because of the cost differential, I mean, it's a massive amount.
Right.
Right.
Carol,
Right.
do other local, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, maybe Andy does, the other elementary districts locally, do most of them offer benefits, not offer benefits? Is it a total mix?
It's based on the hours.
Right.
Because what's happening now, even in Hollis, some of our staff, because of the students they're working with, and when the day begins and the day ends, they'll qualify for benefits.
Okay.
And that's just federal law.
Yeah.
So
Even through our district.
even in our district, yeah. So, I mean, we will start to see some individuals, and those all get posted. So if Amy and I are both paras, and we're both looking for benefits, it gets posted, and we both know that that particular position is benefits eligible, and we can both apply. So it's, the union is well aware of it, and they understand, because some people are getting on the bus with their student
Right.
and doing the bus ride.
It's all day.
Or some people are here to greet the student when they get off the bus, and are here waiting for special transportation after school, so their day puts them into
Naturally
qualification.
longer.
Yeah.
Do I remember that our base pay for the lowest qualified and possible hire was something on $11 an hour?
I want to say it was like $11.39, that's a number that jumps
I
out.
mean, you
at me.
can't get a
which hire
babysitter.
are you talking about? A para
Well, on
Or
our
just
tables
on the table
overall,
at all?
I mean, it was possible for us to be offering only $11 an hour to some positions given.
It was-
That's
levels
correct.
of
It was low,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is correct.
I don't think you can
Yeah.
hire, I mean, I see signing bonuses at fast food restaurants.
Right, and the part of the move to the.
I know. Where?
Nice, Rob. The co-op table that we're gonna propose to move to for FY '24, that's part of this plan, doesn't have that, what is it called, base, right?
Right,
It just starts with Cat 1.
right.
And
Step
you'll
one,
see,
yep.
step 1, excuse me, yeah, step 1. And you'll see in your board packet with FY '24, it talks about shifting the instructional assistants and food service workers and the cook
Okay.
position and the head cook positions to different categories. So it does just shift things around, and of course, we'll take a look at, once they get onto the co-op table or off, that kind of thing, it'll just make sure that they're where they're supposed to be from there as well.
And these categories are pay categories, they're not. right?
Correct, correct. Yep. Yeah, for anybody who wants to see the grid, it's available on the SAU website.
We've been struggling, I think, as a district, schools everywhere, to retain hourly workers in a pay environment where private industry is just able to, or has been forced anyway, to pay a great deal more per hour than we've been able to. And if we put ourselves at risk of not being able to attract enough we cannot say enough how critically important our support staff is. They are the ball bearings and the glue that holds the day together and makes it possible for us to deliver the product that we promise. So we have to be able to fulfill those positions.
Yeah, and that was really the basis
goal,
for
yeah.
this whole discussion that we broached with them, was to make sure that we don't lose those ball bearings and that glue.
Yeah.
We cannot operate, we cannot deliver without those support staffers, and they know it, and we wanted them to know that we also knew
Yeah,
it.
very much respect what they do.
And thanks for this heavy lift.
Of
It's
course.
not an easy solution, but a solution needed to be found, so.
I do
Well,
feel we'll need
yeah.
to explain it with a little more clarity come district meeting.
Sure.
For sure. I think the benefit is that you guys had a preview of it.
We've been through all the contract
Right,
negotiations.
right, so,
Piece of it.
but yeah, for sure, it'll be better explained to the layman when we come to that time.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'm gonna call for a vote. All in favor? Great. And then we have a
Thanks, everybody.
second motion, Carol.
For sure. I move to ratify the tentative agreement between the Hollis School Board and the Hollis Education Support Staff Association / NEA New Hampshire, Hessa, for FY '24.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Great.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Moving on to policy. Brooke?
Okay, I was wondering if you were wondering. I'm there,
Crickets.
I'm there, I'm on. All right.
Rotate the camera
Paging
on
Brooke.
you.
Okay. I move to, so, let's see, we're looking at,
EBB.
yes, for policy EBB, school safety program. I move to amend number 11 by replacing assessments with evaluations and eliminate professionals with district professionals. And for number 12, inserting de-escalation prior to restraint, and accept the second reading of policy EBB school safety program as amended. So these changes were based on the feedback.
Can I have a second?
Oh, sorry.
Second.
Okay.
Carol's
Did-
fine.
That was everybody,
Didn't
okay.
we-
Everybody.
Did we have
The whole
two
team.
stacked
Everybody
motions though?
seconded.
Did we have two stacked?
No.
No?
Why?
Okay.
What do you
Okay,
think?
okay, go ahead, Brooke.
Never mind.
Yeah, these are just based on the feedback that we got from the last meeting, so we took those back and we did some.
I think it's very clarifying, it's just a few
Yeah.
small words,
Yeah.
but it makes it much more clear.
Yeah, nice work.
Absolutely.
Any discussion, any further discussion? No, okay, all in favor? 5-0-0.
So
Great.
nothing else to take back on that one.
No, that was good.
Okay.
We'll see you next month.
All right. I move to amend policy IHBAA, special education, determination of a specific learning disability in its entirety by replacing it with the copy provided with the agenda and accept the second reading as amended.
Second.
Okay, so this one,
I leap to second because I owe the board an apology for my lunatic behavior last time. I'm sorry, it lit a fuse that's an old emotional burden I carry. And I very much appreciate this language change. I really
Good.
appreciate that last additional line that it's just a gateway for parents to feel like they have the tools they need to start the process. So,
well, yeah, it sparked a good conversation at
well,
policy,
your
so it's
forbearance is
okay.
very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for your passion, Tammy.
Yeah, it's good suggestions. Any other conversation, discussion? No? Okay.
Glad
All
we
in
can make
favor?
it happen.
Because it makes me
Zero.
quiet.
Okay. And one more.
All right. I move to accept the first reading of policy IHBA, programs for peoples with disabilities, as presented.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
So here, we brought this to our Director of Student Services for the work that was, the edits that were created for this policy.
Wow, it hasn't been updated in quite a while. Jeez, 2006.
So the last sentence of the third paragraph, I'm not sure, it doesn't read right to me. I'm not sure if it's just me, but maybe you guys can just take a look at that and make sure that it is clear, because I was like struggling with the wording. I read it a few times and I was like, maybe I'm just,
Well, syntactically, it seems correct, but it is quite the mouthful.
Right.
It could
So-
be broken down.
What
sorry, it's the last sentence in the third paragraph. It starts with, "This system shall include notice."
yeah,
So, okay,
If that could be broken into two sentences somehow.
maybe, I'm not sure.
So these changes that were made, Brooke, were they based on suggested verbiage from the NHSBA?
suggested edits by the administration, I think.
That's what I was trying to ask, was it beyond just our administrative folks making these suggested edits, or is there a guide, like, trying to answer Amy's question of this
Right,
one
about the
being real
specific
kludgy,
language.
right, is there something we can kind of fall back on that's an existing state level
Well,
policy?
it went to Lauren as a director of special ed to review it from the lens of all the laws and policies and procedures.
Gotcha.
But we can definitely work at maybe that sentence may be too long. Maybe we could break it
There's
up.
a lot in there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
just,
I fully trust Lauren.
Yeah,
I was
yep.
just trying to
Right.
give her something to lean on
Yeah.
versus having to try to
So we
Yeah.
can
build
go
it
back
herself
and
with
compare it now,
policy.
that, like, all I know is that this is what,
we need.
she worked for us, so now we can take it to policy and, cause,
Maybe edit it just a
Yeah.
I had a question about the first sentence of the last paragraph. It says, "The district recognizes its obligation to provide an education for all students determined to be educationally disabled, et cetera, well, and in need of special education related services." I'd like to propose an edit that would say, "The district recognizes its obligation to provide a free and appropriate education for all students, including those determined to be educationally disabled, et cetera."
I like that. Yep.
Simply because where it
And
says
it's
to provide an
recognizable,
education is so qualitatively
terminology.
missing. And
Yeah.
free and appropriate education is FAPE, which, FA,
It's very
what am I saying?
recognizable.
P,
Fape.
yeah, so that's right. And it does occur at the very top paragraph as well, so.
Yeah.
bring that edit back.
you send me the language that
It's right there, see the blue?
okay.
Okay, so I think we need to vote on approving this one for first reading. Okay, all in favor? Okay.
Look forward to seeing the next one. Thanks, Brooke, for that.
Okay. So may I please have go ahead.
you had added the board member to Bud
Oh my
Com.
gosh, I did, you're right, thank you.
Okay.
That's right, I would like to, can I make the motion myself?
Yep.
I'm gonna motion to appoint Rob Mann as the second alternate to the Budget Committee.
I don't think we can.
Question, yeah, I don't,
Non-voting.
okay. What is the need to have somebody there that doesn't have a vote? I'm
I
just,
think explain.
based on my
answer
understanding,
purposes.
does the RSA allow for a second representative? I think there's only room for a representative and an alternate, and we're kind of adding something.
Can I say
And
that a
the
few years
representative-
ago, there was a vote on a matter, doesn't matter what the matter was, before the Budget Committee, and the Select Board representative was out of town, and their alternate was out of town. And so the chair of the Select Board at the time named a third member to attend in their place. And that was challenged on a legal basis. The
And
chair of
upheld.
of the Budget Committee went and did the homework and learned that legally that appointed individual's vote was moot and it was removed from the tally. So I think to your point, there's a representative and an alternate
yeah.
are the only ones that are recognized.
So I would ask that maybe the board here considers, you can decide to appoint anybody you want, whenever you want, to a committee or whatever, or as a representative, and you can change that anytime you want. By doing so, you allow that person to be active voter and everything else, and then if you needed to change it back a month from now, you may do so. But it has to be put out in a public situation like this and voted and approved. That makes me a full member as a representative that can vote by RSA.
Yeah.
But I can't if I am I don't even know if this term actually exists as a second alternate. I don't think it even exists. And I would just ask you to consider that it doesn't make a lot of sense to put somebody on a board that can't vote and sits there. Maybe I can
What is the
talk to
purpose
it.
of all this?
So there's
What's going on?
a meeting, a BudCom meeting. Amy is our ex officio member to the Hollis
Right.
BudCom. I'm her alternate.
Right,
Neither of us can attend
Ah.
on Monday the 9th.
got it.
So that's why we were trying to make sure we had representation.
Yeah.
So for a little while, if you change me and Carol,
And
and
then
now
change it
I'm
back.
now the alternate.
Yeah.
And then at some point, a date certain in the future that we change it back, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I get to be able to vote and actively participate. Otherwise, there's
I
really,
don't think Tom will see him after what we went through
Well,
on that
no,
one vote.
right, I mean, so Tom
touched base with
is-
him.
I did touch base with Tom, and he, a second alternate, but there is no such thing as second alternate, right?
right.
Rob can attend the meeting and potentially not vote.
So we could share information.
Exactly.
Okay.
I will do whatever the board wants me to do.
As long as it's been
I'm just
vetted
trying
and you
to
have a legal
advise.
pathway, that's fine. I just remember that it was mortifying for everyone involved, the chair,
Right.
our board, the select board, that something that seemed perfectly common sense, the chair of the select board chose a third person, just like you're doing, for the
Right.
same exact reason.
Right.
Perfectly reasonable and common sense, but legally it wasn't allowed
Right.
for that vote to count. But if you've already vetted it
Right.
as just an information delivery,
I mean,
type of thing, a
that
discussion.
can work too. I mean, I get to talk, but I just don't have a say. I'll do whatever either,
So
whatever
basically,
the board wants.
when we appointed you two, then they had to approve it after
No,
that?
no,
Approve our
no.
but-
We have
but
full
if we
control
res-
over
If we
who.
rescind somebody's and then, and like what you were
No,
saying,
they don't
that's
have
not
to,
a.
they don't have to approve it, but we can only have one representative and then one alternate. And we communicate in advance who those members are.
Oh, okay,
So
so we
Rob
can't now
is-
change that, you're just
We
what we're
can.
saying.
you can always just say, we decided that Rob is now the alternate, Carol is not, he can vote. And then if you wanted to change it a month from now or 5 months from now, it's completely the board's decision to make.
I'll say that vote situation I described turned out to have an important, I don't even remember the topic, but because I remember the emotionality of it, and it turned out it was an important, for the person who was sent by the select board to have that vote. It didn't really change a ton, but it was important, and he
Yeah.
wasn't allowed to vote, and his vote had to be, what was the word, not rescinded, but,
Removed from the tally.
yeah,
Yeah.
removed from the tally, there's a word.
I just want to be on record, I'm agnostic to either way. I'll do whatever the board wants me to do. If you want me to go and just have a voice and not vote,
I
that's fine.
prefer that you have the vote, personally. I
So-
feel like I'd like to be able to
What
say.
else do you guys have to say? You
So,
just have
we'll-
more information?
yeah, we're just peeking at
Looking at
the,
the
at the
agenda.
schedule. So, Monday the 9th, the Hollis BudCom meeting is the second review of the town budget. Tuesday, January 10th, of the Hollis BudCom meeting, is the second review of our school district budget.
And y'all can go. to
I'm
that.
going to that one.
Amy's able to go.
I
I'm
see.
traveling for work
I
next
see.
week.
Yeah.
So it's just a town budget.
So it's the town budget.
It's not that critical.
It's-
Yeah.
Not hugely critical for voting purposes.
The school board's
If we were
vote-
talking about
Yeah.
our district meeting, we would want to make sure that that was covered. So I don't know if it's worth making a switch. If we want to, that's totally fine. I'm support whatever we need to do. This is a total anomaly that we're both unavailable on one of these out-of-cycle meetings.
Honestly, it's not that anomalous. I mean, over the years,
Does
there have been
happen.
times when the seat goes empty on one side or the
It
other, and
happens.
if it's the town side,
So,
our interest in the
We all have
town's
day
budget issues is really, the overlap tends to be, at the police department where the SRO might be involved. I assume there's nothing there.
yeah, and I mean, our public hearings aren't
paving,
until
water.
February, and
Right.
that's gonna be,
Right.
all of us anyway. So I will let you guys kind of decide how you want to proceed, if you think it's worth it. I don't know, we don't have materials right now, but it's
The only-
not the final.
The only-
is it? It's just
Yeah,
the
so
second review.
it's not even important that we even have representation there
No.
that night at all. My only question would be, even if we went ahead and did a second alternate, I'm not so sure that even gives me rights to even speak and sit up there, because I'm not even sure it's a recognized position. I just see I see being problematic, because I had never heard of a second
Okay.
alternate.
I mean, I had mentioned this to Tom before we started talking about appointing a second alternate, that Carol and I could not attend and that you would be attending, and he was fine with that. He just reminded me that you wouldn't be able to vote.
Okay.
The the board of select people have had to do that before,
Mm-hmm.
where
Yep.
the two ex officios are unavailable, so someone sits,
Yeah,
just
that
to
part's-
talk on stuff, so
Yeah.
I don't, has precedent. So
I tend to think it's better that somebody is there,
Mm-hmm.
whether you vote or not,
Right.
Right.
but can speak to
I agree,
things,
yeah.
can
In case
maybe
there are
engage in questions
Right.
and, be that voice
Clarify.
that maybe somebody in the community would like asked, and, well, the guy wasn't there and nobody asked it,
Right.
Right.
So, there's value there, so
Okay.
I'm agnostic either way,
I think I'm going to rescind my motion.
okay?
That makes sense. Rob, can you go?
I can go?
Yeah.
You'd be like,
No, I have plans.
No, actually,
No, I'm booked. I'm booked that day.
I just wanted to,
All right.
sometimes the obvious one doesn't get asked.
Moving right along, I need a motion to go into non-public, please.
so do you need it read properly?
I
Yes.
do,
Those two.
please.
Dawn likes it when we read them.
Okay.
Are you
I
gonna
will
read
do
it?
that.
That's the
I
most
can read
it,
important,
that's
fine.
most
Yeah.
important motions to read.
Give me a second to scroll to it.
I have it right here on my paper if you want.
Oh, you and your paper, I love it. All right. I move that the board by roll call go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, section 2, what is our reason? Section A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, and C, to discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself.
Second.
Okay.
By roll call.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Brooke, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Rob, aye.
Carol Roy, aye.
Amy, I. Okay, so at 7:39, we are in non-public.
I believe the conference room
And
is
there will be
open.
no business to